to the Freedom Corner podcast with the Mississippi Freedom Caucus. I'm your host, Stephen Utroska. Today I've got caucus member, Representative Brady Williamson in the studio. Brady, always good to be with you.
Glad to be here.
Now, last time you came on, you gave a shout out to your wife. So you want to give a shout out to your wife again?
Well, I'd actually like to give a shout out to my daughter and my son. My daughter, she's got cheer tryouts today, and you know how stressful that can be for mothers and the daughters competing. But she's going to absolutely kill it. So no pressure. I know you're going to do really well. I'm very proud of you, and I'll see you soon.
Good. All right. Well, so today you guys spent a lot of time on the floor discussing one bill.
Right.
And I don't know, somewhere which you guys started at basically 10 a.m. this morning and went all day, didn't take a lunch break, kept going, a lot of grandstanding on this bill, but everything came down to basically one topic, and that's CRT, critical race theory.
Right.
So the bill originated in the Senate, and I know they had some grandstanding over there when the bill came through over there during when it passed through committee. I think the entire Black Caucus got up and, kind of walked out of the caucus. I mean, not the caucus, the committee meeting when it passed. Then it went out on the floor and same things. Now it's over here. No different. You guys spent a lot of time talking about it, a lot of time going back and forth, talking about critical race theory, talking about the bill. And so just wanted to, I know that critical race theory, trying to make sure that is not in our public schools, is something that the Mississippi Freedom Caucus early on this year came out with your priorities. That was one of your top priorities, to make sure that we got this passed in Mississippi to prevent that in our schools. So you guys have been doing a lot of work on it, both kind of under the dome and outside the dome, talking about what's going on and what's happened. So there are be a lot of people at that meeting here in Central Mississippi tonight. But wanted to get your thoughts on the bill, what's included in the bill. Let's make sure that all our listeners know exactly what the bill does, so they're clear on it. There's no, nothing hidden in the bill. You and I were talking before. It's only a 3-page bill, which is kind of surprising for a bill that's coming through the Mississippi legislature. Usually it can be, a bill can be hundreds of pages long. And so a lot of times they kind of hide a small snippet of something in these hundreds of pages bills. And so you're never really sure sometimes about bills when they come through, but it's 3 pages,
right.
3 pages long, not very in depth, not very long. Certainly in the hours and hours that you guys were on the floor, anybody could have read this 3-page bill to know exactly what's in it.
Sure.
Just weigh on it.
CRT is the catchphrase, and critical race theory is the catchphrase. And if there's anything misleading about the bill, maybe it is the title, because what we're really trying to do is what the bill says, and that is to provide that no public institution of higher learning, community college, school district, or charter school shall direct or compel students to affirm that any sex, race, ethnicity, religion, or national origin is inherently superior or inferior. That's it. We just do not want our children, who have very impressionable minds, to be taught in any form or fashion that they have inherent characteristics that make them inferior or superior. Our youth, especially from their fathers and their parents and their teachers, are in a sense, in their minds, they are who they're told they are.
Right.
Those blessings, so to speak, that we speak to our children become true in their mind first, and then in reality second. And so I don't want any child to be taught that they're inferior for any reason at all. And I can really sum it up from a godly perspective. We all have our flaws, and I'm full of sin myself. But if you put our legislation in the hands of God, or scrub it off God's will, you can ask yourself these questions. And Democrats, Republicans, behind closed doors, for the most part, very much agree on these questions and answers. Do you believe we are created by God?
Yep.
Yes. Do you believe that we are all created by God for a unique purpose? Yes. Do you believe that color gets in the way, or any of these other characteristics get in the way of God's purpose? And the answer is no. So we don't want to teach our kids in any way that that's the case.
Right.
In addition, we've been blessed this week to have a young lady from Germany, that's an exchange student, also be a page. So she's been on the House floor during this debate. And when she wasn't on the House floor, she was out near the clerk's office watching it live.
This is just like a high school exchange student from Germany.
Right. High school.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
She's here. And I can't help but think about her the whole time during this process. Like, what is going through her head? I mean, what Germany went through. And it wasn't based on color of skin. It's the other stuff that can get in the way that we're trying to prevent. And so I went out there and asked her, I was like, you know what we're trying to do here, right? It's not all the grandstanding on erasing history, because we don't want to erase history.
Right.
She said, no, I get it totally. We do not want to teach anybody a superior or inferior based on any of these things.
Yep.
It can lead to wars.
That's right.
World War II.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking about history, so it kept, over and over and over. It's like everybody that got up to, ask questions. So Joey Hood presented the bill to ask him questions about the bill. It seemed like everybody that got up said, so now are you saying we can't teach history anymore? I think 100 times he said, no, this isn't about teaching history. Of course we can teach history. And he even alluded to, we have the Civil Rights Museum here in Jackson. And the Civil Rights Museum teaches about our history. And I don't think there's anybody that would say we're proud of some of the history that the Civil Rights Museum teaches. But if you walk through there, you see the woes of our past. And that's not only Mississippi, but our country as a whole. There's lots of things that happened in our past. We were, our country was founded on the belief that all men are created equal. But that hasn't always been the case in our country and here in Mississippi. And that's what the Civil Rights Museum teaches. This isn't about trying to hide that or trying to erase history. This is about us learning from that history and making sure that as we move forward, we're not repeating some of that history. And that's what this is saying, is that we don't want to treat any group of people or teach that any group of people is more superior or inferior than any other. And that's right. All it does, cut and dry. That's what it says. It's not about teaching history. We want to teach that history, even though we're not proud of some of that history. We want to teach that so we can continue to learn from it, and so that we make sure that the history isn't deemed to repeat itself.
That's right. Our founding principles were exactly right, but we didn't get it right until recently. And we're still in the progress of fulfilling our founding principles, that all men are created equal. But we have been on the right direction for a long time. The world, those maybe that are jealous of us would love for us to fail in this area.
Yeah.
But we're determined not to.
Yeah. Well, and of course, the only people that were standing up and basically talking down about this bill were Democrats. Mm-hmm. The Democrats were the only ones who stood up and said anything about this bill in a negative light. And one independent that was a Democrat.
Right.
So basically, they're the only ones saying anything negative about this bill.
It was a great opportunity to hear a lot of our history. And I wish we would open up the floor and just talk about Mississippi history. But all of those historical arguments today had nothing to do with the bill.
Right. That's right. Yeah. Well, like you said, it's just grandstanding. But it's interesting to me to know that the Democrats back during the Civil Rights movement, they were the ones who were also against any kind of legislation like this that says you can't teach that one race is superior to the other, because it was the Democrats that led most of the opposition to civil rights movement. It was the Republicans who really led civil rights movement, in bringing forth civil rights movement. So it's interesting how we kind of come full circle here. They are again, Democrats aren't wanting legislation that says our public schools can't teach one group of people, whether it's based on their religion, creed, color, race, whatever. They don't want to put legislation in that says we can't teach that one is superior and inferior to the other. Not about history.
Right.
Has nothing to do with history. Nothing. It says we can't teach now that one is inferior, superior or inferior to the other. But here they are. They're fighting it. They added or attempted to add, 10 different amendments to it, which again is all just grandstanding. They knew they weren't going to pass. They knew that the Republican supermajority wasn't going to pass any of their amendments to try to railroad this bill or do anything. But they, it was them that kept going on and on and on. And of course, now all of them have sound bites. They all got sound bites going up and speaking on the bill, introducing their amendments so they can play it back to their constituency. And I understand that. But for a 3-page bill that says something that you would think most people, except for the people who, want to teach that there are some superior races to others, but for the overwhelming majority of Mississippians, which I would say probably don't believe that, there's no reason why this bill like this should have taken, 7 hours on the floor of a debate to pass.
Right. It was nothing but grandstanding, because those very individuals that I've spoken with outside of the House floor, we agree on these issues.
Yeah.
It's very surprising that they kept pushing the same argument. And it's also very interesting that you mentioned the parties. Both parties have had their flaws over the years, and
Yeah.
they've ebbed and flowed in certain areas, but the same principles never change.
Right. Well, and I'll say, I mean, I am the first to take every opportunity I can to throw the Republican Party under the bus.
Absolutely.
Because the Republican Party nowadays is not what it was even just a few years ago in Mississippi. And, we've said, we've released, from the caucus, released some statements saying that one of the press statements we put out said that 2022, the year that the Republican Party platform died.
Right.
I mean, so we're the first to be critical of our own party, right?
Well, you've got to stand for something, or you'll fall in any direction, basically. And so without a platform posted, or to the public, we know what it is.
Yeah. And I just say that to say we're not partisan. Right. Of course, we're Republicans. All the Freedom Caucus members are Republicans. But we're not just saying, these things because we're partisan, trying to say bad things about the Democratic Party. We say bad things about the Republican Party too.
That's right.
We stand for principle 100% of the time, every time, no matter what, failure the party makes. So if the Republican Party's making a failure, we'll call them out. If the Democratic Party's making a failure, which they tend to do a lot more than the Republican Party does, we're going to call them out on it. And this is one of their flaws.
Right.
Yeah. So the bill ultimately passed, and no changes to it. So I think that it will. I think it's going to get signed into law now. I don't think there were any change. Was there a committee amendment to it from the House before it came out onto the floor?
No, I don't believe there was.
Yeah. Okay. So if we concur with the bill, it'll now go up to the governor for signature. And I feel pretty certain Tate Reeves is going to sign this into law. I don't think that there will be any issues there with that. Again, it's a cut and dry bill.
Right.
Do you believe, I guess it's not fair to say 100%, do you believe one race is superior or inferior to the other? Voting against this bill doesn't necessarily mean that you believe that. But if you vote against this bill, you're saying maybe that you not believe that, but you are okay with schools teaching that.
Right.
So, and, of course, they brought up, some of the Democratic opponents to this bill they kept bringing up, well, this is free speech. Right. What about free speech? Do we not want to give them free speech? Well, it's not about free speech. If a student in one of the schools, is talking about something, we're not going in. This bill isn't giving us the authority to go in and a brown shirt him and pull him out of school and, him disappear kind of thing. This is saying our teachers, public school teachers can't teach this.
Right. If you teach in a manner that is apparent that you're teaching one race is superior or inferior in the classroom, you're asking kids not to present their opinions based on factual information. You're asking them to only pursue that method of teaching, or that so-called reality, I guess, which is not a reality. But if you're teaching that's a reality, you need to really check yourself.
Yeah, that's right. Well, again, they kept making they kept going back to history, and then they kept making the statement, "Oh, this is against First Amendment rights," but it's not.
Right.
It's not a First Amendment issue. If a student wants to get up there and say that, he can say that. Now, if he's being disruptive to the class, of course, they can do other things. But, if a student wants to say that, then he can say that. He's got the right to say that, First Amendment right. Although within college, students have a little bit more authority or flexibility having the First Amendment on campus. High schools, the Supreme Court's already ruled that, they can't be disruptive. So if they're going in and saying things and being disruptive, then that's in secondary school. So if you're in, elementary, middle school, or high school kind of thing, their Supreme Court has ruled about some of those things. But either way, this isn't against them.
Right.
This isn't against them saying something. This is against them teaching something to our students that everybody should agree, I would think,
Right.
that this is inherently wrong to say that one group is superior or inferior to another.
We know
And
this.
I know it's so simple. It seems like such common sense. This bill seems like common sense, but there's people who are fighting it.
Right.
And they kept bringing up all. I mean, there's one of them said, one of the Democrats brought up. He said, "Is this a way you guys are trying to defund public schools?" Like, all right, no. Like, how are we going to defund public schools by doing this? That's not what this is about. We're literally just asking teachers,
Right.
don't teach that one race is superior or inferior to the other. That's all we're asking.
We want our public schools to be strong. We want the products of our public schools, the children, to know that they have every opportunity in the world. I mean, I personally believe you need to have your mission in life align with God's will, and that if you do, you have every opportunity to do that. But we do not want to. This is not about defunding the schools. And the party that is opposing this, for the most part, my kids are at public school. Many of those children of the opposing party are in private school.
Right.
They've pulled themselves out of the public school system, but yet they are saying that they want things to happen in the school that they left.
Yeah,
So,
that's right. Yep. Well, I don't want us to debate this as long as they did, because I think we all agree what's going on, and it's a good bill. Good bill. Something the Mississippi Freedom Caucus came out and said early on. This is one of our major tenets this year. Glad to see that you guys are fighting for it. Glad to see that you guys are pushing and involved. Glad to see that the Republicans on the Senate side pushed this bill out, got it. This was the language was the original language, at least for the bill, was some of the model legislation that Mississippi Center for Public Policy put out. So they're a great partner to the caucus and to the network that we work with a lot on legislation. So glad for their work for this. But again, it's something that it's ridiculous that we have to create legislation to say this, but we're in that period of time that you gotta say it, you gotta do it, and protect our schools. So glad you got worked on it. Before we get out of here today, let me ask you: is there anything else you guys have coming up, particularly that's interesting? I know appropriation bills, spending bills, certainly some tax bills still coming up, local and private taxes that'll be coming up in the next 2 weeks. So we just got a committee deadline this week, about 140 bills that were still, alive, died on Tuesday. Coming up the next couple of weeks during, or the rest of this week, all of next week, and then a couple of days, leading up to the next deadline for bills down on the floor. But anything that you can think of, and I know I kind of threw you on the spot there, but
just kind of put spending, appropriations, budget, debt, all in the same boat. I guess I would ask our listeners, if you had a 20% growth in your income last year, what would you do with it? Would you maybe pay down some of that debt, or would you spend every ounce of it, then some, and then borrow more? Well, that's kind of what we're doing, and that's kind of what we're trying to stop, or at least put a halt on. So you'll see a little bit of that over the next couple of weeks. It's a train that's hard to slow down.
Yeah, that's right. And one bill just came to my mind that the caucus has been fighting pretty good, and it's on the calendar, but it hasn't made it on the floor yet. That could is the bill, the Region Smart, the Interstate Compact bill that David Parker, David and I talked about it last week. Live, it's still making its way through. That gives an unelected commission of bureaucrats who will be based out of Memphis.
That's right.
By the way, outside, not even in Mississippi. It gives them the authority to basically institute taxes, the domain, create fees. I mean, just everything about the bill is bad.
Right.
I actually heard that there's been more talk about this, more national media coming from it. Some new things that are coming up that the caucus is going to put out about this, within the next couple of days about it. But just a horrible bill. So anybody that's listening, they certainly need to call the representative and let them know that this Region Smart Interstate Compact bill, it's a bill between Mississippi, Arkansas, and Tennessee that basically says, hey, we'll give unelected people from all three states the ability to take our own people's land without them being able to fight it, without the legislature having to approve it. I don't know who ever thought that was a good idea. And, the people for DeSoto County should be outraged with their Senator David Parker over him introducing this bill and getting it through this far. But either way, it's a bad one coming up.
Yeah. And, we always say, no offense, Tennessee, Memphis, I've lived there. There's a lot of great places there, but we always say Memphis is the best thing to happen to North Mississippi.
Yeah.
But now we're going to get that little segment of North Mississippi that escaped that, controlled by Memphis.
Yeah.
And Arkansas.
That's right.
And I'm all for Tennessee and Arkansas. We're United States that have some differences, but I don't think there should be a partnership in a geographic region that turns it over to another state.
Yeah. Yeah, I talked to some friends I have that work in policy in both states, in Arkansas and in Tennessee. So Arkansas is not in session right now, so they're kind of getting a leg up on it because they do it every other session. So they'll know next session coming up, the bill's coming. They'll be able to try to defeat it before it gets this far. Tennessee's in session right now, and I talked to a friend of mine that does policy work in Tennessee, and she lives, kind of on Knoxville, kind of East Tennessee. And she said, hey, can we just give you guys Memphis? We'll give up Memphis. If you guys just want to annex Memphis, Tennessee will freely give you Memphis. And not that she has any authority to do that, but jokingly, she's like, if you guys just want to take Memphis, we'll let you have it. I was like, no. Like, you guys keep them,
right, right.
But anyway, it's a bad bill, have what we need to try to defeat that bill, but we certainly weren't in that. And the grassroots coming out and telling their representative that if there's a die a horrible death on the floor by
Absolutely.
no vote. We try to get this out Thursday afternoons. But again, this is the Freedom Corner with the Mississippi Freedom Caucus. You guys have a great week.
Thank you.